Welcome back, everyone, to theCUBE's coverage here. Special presentation here in our Palo Alto studios. I'm John Furrier, host of theCUBE. This is theCUBE plus the NYSE Wired community. We got 2 film days going on. We have AI for CFOs and AI innovating leaders here in Silicon Valley. This is our point of presence in Silicon Valley. Of course, we got the studio on the floor of the NYSE, and our next guest has been on the New York Stock Exchange studio floor with Dave Vellante. Karen Welker is here with me, the Chief Financial Officer at Sysdig. Karen, thanks for coming into our super point of presence here in Palo Alto and Silicon Valley. Thanks for coming in.
It's great to be here. It's my backyard, so thanks for having me back, John.
We got Silicon Valley, Wall Street connected with theCUBE and NYSE, so it's been really interesting 4 months, and I really appreciate you coming in and being part of the community in this experiment. Sysdig, we know a lot about. We've been covering you guys since the early days. Great entrepreneurial story.
Yep.
Rapid growth, cloud native. You're in that world, so first of all, great to talk to you. How's business going?
It's great. It's a really exciting time to be in cloud security, particularly with the adoption of AI. It's tremendous. I like to say that we're entering into a new era of cloud security. The attacks are faster, they're more sophisticated, they're unpredictable, and AI is going to be a force multiplier when it comes to that.
You know, one of the motivations for doing this AI CFO Summit was born out of some of the work we've been doing over the past few years, but last year in particular at RSA and AWS Reinforce and Black Hat, we started to see a conversation around little things that we weren't really paying attention to that got on our radar, which was obviously, we've been saying for 10 years, will data be on the balance sheet? That was the whole, or big data days. But different conversations were coming up around cybersecurity, which was insurance policies aren't differentiated on like data. I'm like, what? So data is vulnerable. Okay.
Absolutely.
But some data is more vulnerable than others. If you lose this data, it might not be worth, but you're starting to see now conversations around stuff in tech that are mapping to the business model. Okay, that's one on cybersecurity side, and then just on business model transformation, as cloud native sets the table for agentic systems coming in and all these new, either cost optimizations and cost efficiencies, but revenue. So you have all kinds of like CFO-like conversations around risk management. How do I, if I can't get that supply chain, those GPUs, how do I? So we're starting to see the industry of the Chief Financial Officer be leaning into a lot more technical business model conversations. I mean, a lot more than, they've been there before, obviously, but like more than ever.
I agree, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's been a number of years where the CFO is definitely a strategic advisor there to actually help the executives, the CEO, execute on the strategy. I think also the last couple of years, just what we've seen with the macro, a real lean in to be much more operational to find the efficiencies. And then of course, this is a transformative technology within AI, and it's not just for the CFO to look within their own function to figure out what's going to drive the business and drive more efficiency. Is actually to be a partner to the business overall. So I think it's very interesting times, and I'd love to unpack that. And then of course there's another element of that of like the interplay between AI and security as well. Yeah,
well let's unpack the first one, because I was just talking to Rita from Firstboard.io, which you're part of, and what she was bringing up is the business value of the network. But one of the things about the CFO I'd like to unpack with you is, you mentioned the business strategy. The classic conventional wisdom was, okay, here's our business model, here's our business plan, let's match the business strategy with the financial strategy, or does the financial strategy drive the business strategy? So there's always been that debate of, but you got to match the financial strategy and the infrastructure of finance with the business. So they go hand in hand. Okay, great. Fast forward to now, it's kind of disruptive in an enablement way. So as a CFO, what are some of the things you're seeing around how to grok matching the financial strategy to the business models that are evolving? Because you got both going on. Could you lay that out for us and share your perspective on that and what your observations are and what you see as ways to rein in the chaos,
yeah,
so to speak?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think there's I break it down into sort of 2 areas. One, I think from a product perspective, I really believe, just like people, the term was coined, a decade or 2 ago about every company is a software company. I think every company will be an AI company, right? So what are you offering in terms of AI embedded in your product that actually provides value to your customers is one external kind of view. which is a very important conversation to drive and drive the investments that will get you there. And then I think there's the internal aspect as well, right, which is the productivity and how you can actually do more with less, but also train up a workforce on this new technology. So if I take the product side for a second, externally, at Sysdig, our solution is called Sage. It is agentic workforce. I think it's highly differentiated because unlike a lot of offerings, it's not just a prompt into a chat bot. It has domain expertise and context that knows where you are in the product. And when you look at that through the lens of like what problems are we solving in security for our customers, well, you can look at AI as both like a force for good in security, but it's also a force for bad actors, right? So how do you level the playing field there? So I think this is where AI is so important to security. It's an industry already that has a lot of challenges around labor shortages and skills gaps as well. So I really like the offering that we're bringing to our customers, and the feedback is overwhelmingly positive about how differentiated it is because it really becomes an assistant and it speeds up the time to resolve issues. It helps get to that 5th, 6th level order of questions. And it can also upskill a security analyst that's just learning. So I think product is really, really key. If companies are not like deeply embedded in understanding how to embed AI into their product, I think that is, that will become an existential threat for sure.
It's like you're a double threat talent here with the Masterclass. One, you're a CFO, so you know what people think on the other side of the table, but you're also on the Sysdig side where, for the folks that don't know, I mean, I'll just give you guys props. You've been doing, there's been a lot of good work done in the cloud native wave. You look at, say, this Linux Foundation and say CNCF, what's going on with cloud native infrastructure, Kubernetes, containers, really has changed the programming game.
Absolutely.
But also, like, it helps both the bad guys too. So you're on the technology providing side with AI, going to customers who are trying to grok the AI equation. Thread that needle for us. What is from your perspective on understanding what you're doing here at Sysdig as a CFO, when you go to the other side of the table, the customer side, what are they thinking? What's on their mind? What's the CFO on that side thinking about? Because obviously risk management is always the top conversation. Governance, risk management are big conversations.
Absolutely.
And cyber, the top line, board level, obviously conversation. Thread the needle between your perspective at Sysdig as a CFO to the customer side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hit on a lot of good things here, and I would actually say the CFO and the CISO really need to be partners, right? Because you're absolutely right. It's a strategic imperative. It's a board level topic in terms of cybersecurity. Not only the forces at play, where attacks are happening more often and they're very expensive. And by the way, mileage varies, right? Because the cost can be, on average, $5 to $6 million, but then you can have things that balloon to hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And can be catastrophic for the brand. So the stakes are really high. And then when you look at the regulatory landscape, right, that has changed dramatically. We saw the SEC rules come into place a year ago. Now we have NIS2 that's in place. We have DORA. And there's a whole host of governments around the world that are really taking a much closer look at this, as well as AI. So that need for partnership between the CFO and the CISO, I think, is really important. CISOs, right, have been more technical. Now they're having more exposure to the board, but they really need to demystify and help the business understand, like, okay, what are the things? It can't be absolute assurance, right? And there needs to be a paradigm that says, okay, this is where the revenue is tied to. Here is where the risk is. These are the things that absolutely, need to be top priority, and just have that business acumen to have that conversation. By the same token, I think CFOs, right, like when I mentioned the macro over the last couple of years, they've really regained this sort of muscle memory of, optimization and looking at cost, right? And so I think there needs to be a balance because cybersecurity is so important. It's definitely not a blank check, and people are looking for what is the business value as well, what is the ROI. So, that time to respond, that speed of innovation, even the cost avoidance of saying, okay, well, my team was looking at, 1,000 vulnerabilities, and now I have the power of actually understanding what is actually running in production with a tool like Sysdig, for example, is shrinking that down by like 95%. And that is a story I think that resonates really well with CFOs because they're really looking for that business value.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you look at the old school IT days, CIO ran everything, facilities, rack and stack, and then you saw cloud, secure the perimeter, lock down the Cisco routers, everything was fine, like just protect the perimeter, very simple concept. Cloud comes in, okay, no more perimeter.
It's totally a different ball game. We like to say that identity is the new firewall, right? I mean, the same advantages that that people gain from adopting the cloud, the speed of innovation, time to market, are the same advantages that bad actors have. So everything is wide open. The threat landscape is massive.
Yeah, and if you think about the people that were involved, okay, CIO, and then all of a sudden, oh, wow, we got the security problem. Let's get a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. Oh, now data's involved. Before it's protected on a mainframe. And then now I saw that now you have a Chief Security Officer who's going to manage the physical locations, whether it's retail. So now you have layers and layers. So the aperture of responsibilities going like this, whether it's threat hunting and detection, to identity, to zero trust, the whole gamut is evolving. And so you now have more stakeholders at the table. Now here comes the CFO saying, wait a minute, where's the risk management? What's the payback? So as their CFO has to start thinking about kind of the things like, well, what about supply chain? If I can't get those GPUs, I had to hedge that. Now that could be disruption. So all that aside, it throws into the mix like this whole idea of what's the payback? What's the total cost of ownership? What's the ROI? These are not IT decisions, right? So you're starting to see, how do you view that? How would you unpack or just observe what's the dynamic? I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here, but like riffing, like there's so much going on that's finance related.
There is so much that's going on that's finance related. I think what's really interesting, I'll answer that question through the lens of cloud security because that's where my expertise is. But I think that what you're talking about, I think, is a really good point about legacy tools, right? Like one of the challenges that customers have is like, oh, I have 50 tools, right? How do I manage? How do I even correlate risk across when I have disparate tools? But the other problem too is that a lot of legacy tooling for security is not built for the cloud, right? So it cannot secure the cloud. And so I think one of the value propositions that we bring and that I think CFOs actually really appreciate it. We've seen it time again where we've got, a technical win and our economic buyers like getting, we've crossed the line on the POV and now we're getting to the PO, and then finance comes in, right? Because this is, like you said, this is, these are, potentially big dollars. This is a spend. This is important. There's also the oversight that the CFO has in terms of that risk management. But being able to come in and actually say, hey, I can help consolidate tools that can drive an ROI, as well as I can actually point people to what the true active risk is, and so save them time in terms of productivity. So I think business value selling is super important in our business. I think super important in cybersecurity.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of resilience has been a big topic. Cybersecurity has had a great resilience story. There's frameworks, you mentioned NIST, so you got standards and frameworks, can be nice guardrails around some of the things, at least on the cloud native side. Gen AI is a Wild West. So I've asked everyone to find resilience.
And it's a big fear that CISOs have.
How do you unwind,
right?
Someone leaves an S3 bucket with passwords and just, how do you into an LLM? You can't get that back.
Yes.
So I think, the frameworks will be, just another application. Okay, that being said, if you look at like what you guys are doing, if you say, okay, productivity is the killer app, because what you guys do for developers is a very strong service. You have a lot of CI/CD pipeline capabilities. You help developers
But we also inform that pipeline by telling people what's in use, right? What's in production, and that's where we drive a lot of value because we're just pointing them to like the problems that they actually need to solve, right?
So on the developer, if the developer is going to be the productivity asset, you guys all that benefits. How does a CFO think about the productivity, not just of the developer, because they're going to also enable business productivity as low code, no code comes out tools. So now you have business users essentially coding via prompts. Now under the hood, where you guys play, you got to watch everything. I mean, there's a lot of areas you got to monitor and do risk assessment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why the the best of suite sort of product that can actually bring all of this together and have the correlated risk. So basically seeing, from the CI/CD pipeline, what's running in real time, what's actually, even on the posture management side, it's not just about the credentials, it's about what can happen in between that static scanning if privileges get escalated. Okay. It's also about cloud logs and cloud activity and pulling that in and having that in a streaming sense to basically to alert someone right now to what is happening. And I think pulling that all together to understand this, what we often refer to as like combinatory risk, right? So basically this person has escalated their privileges, now they've turned off multi-factor authentication, now they are they're performing an activity that looks suspicious. Mm-hmm. It's that chain of events, and that can only be done in a dynamic way with the power of actually what we call like runtime or real-time insights.
Well, it's a super exciting company, Sysdig, and we've been great to follow them. I guess my question from a personal standpoint is, as a CFO, you've seen the waves of innovation. What's it like in this time for CFOs in general? AI's here, the business model transformation's upon us. Is there any kind of frameworks or best practices or mental models you can share on how folks could, one, get their arms around this wave and make it productive and make it profitable?
Absolutely. Well, I think governance is important in a couple of different ways. I mean, I think there is the governance of actually working with the CFO, with legal counsel, and really understanding the agreements and understanding like where your data is going. Right? You've mentioned data a couple of times, and I think that is, hugely important and now a big part of the estate. I think that governance is important. I think education is actually huge, and it's something that we're really doubling down on as well. You see this early adoption in pockets within your company, and as a CFO, I'm always saying, okay, well, what's the ROI before we make that investment? And it's definitely early days too with the tooling. So I think there's a lot of experimentation, and I think that even though like more than 82% of companies out there have some sort of footprint or are starting to dip into AI, it's still very much like experiments and really proving it out. But I think education is really, really important. So a lot of people have, the very, like even a year ago with this insane adoption of AI coming, people thought about, jobs being eliminated. And I don't think that's the case. I think, though, it is really about like different skill sets, training, enablement. So one of the things that we're looking at is, can we develop a center of excellence to bring cross-functional teams, like a leader from each cross-functional team, to actually lend their knowledge and really make sure that we're leveraging across the enterprise all of the learnings and that we're focusing on enablement.
Yeah, one of the things I was joking with a friend off camera, obviously, and was saying, these center of excellence are great because, one, it's a great way to create some education, some cross-pollination.
Absolutely.
And then I said, it's also a way to kind of vet who's got the capabilities, because everyone's raising their hands, pick me for the AI leader.
Exactly.
Everyone wants to be the captain of the AI team, so to speak. But not everyone can be, because there's also different slices of the salami, if you will, depending on who you're talking to. You're talking to developers, that's a skill there. If you're talking to someone in that group, AI is for everyone. I mean, you can actually look at AI, depending on where you're looking at it, everyone could have a role. How does an organization figure out leadership around AI from a financial perspective, from a leadership perspective? At the end of the day, it's operational benefits, cost reductions, cost efficiencies, which is savings.
Absolutely.
But also top line revenue.
Yes, exactly.
And that changes the capital game because cost of capital is factored in. I mean, it's a great financial boom time right now.
It really is. I mean, I think we're in the very early days of that, but I think what I would say is that as a CFO, like, you can play a very critical, and central role in this, just from the seat, right? Which is that, if you were purchasing anything else, you're in this sort of, you're going to have visibility to it. You're going to weigh in. You need to work with your business partners on like what outcomes are we expecting, and then checking back to see like, have we gotten there, right? And I think it's very early to see like how like the financial model transforms completely, but you can see the early beginnings of it of like, okay, my support team can handle more cases because they can resolve them more quickly, right? My go-to-market team can do outbounding more efficiently because it's leveraging AI, which can result in top-line benefits. So I think across the organization, we're seeing that. I think as a CFO, you really need to be at the center of that. Yeah. And checking up on it. It's not just a one-stop, and then it's a periodic sort of check-in to really understand how it's evolving.
I was saying to Dave Vellante, we didn't talk about it on the podcast yet. Maybe we'll do it this week. CFO is going to be on sales calls, and the question is, that's going to be a stakeholder. Like, I'm not all sales calls, but the go-to-market, the key accounts where the CEO does talk to customers, the CFO is going to have to get involved because now you have business model integration. Because data is involved in security, so obviously
Correct.
you're heavily involved in those conversations. But even as you're enabling the conversations, is that something that you're seeing happening? Is there more and more of that peer-to-peer conversations happening with CFOs and other CFOs, or even the go-to-market engagements?
Yeah, certainly. I think that, essentially what I described earlier, a little bit about the governance structure, right? And then the compounding effects that AI has on the risks around security. I think it's absolutely a conversation. But I also think, too, it's about people's cloud journey, right? So they, if they're not born in the cloud and they're migrating to the cloud, perhaps they're using a lot of legacy tools. And so I think as a CFO, I can provide that unique lens being into security to talk peer-to-peer about that business value that we can bring.
Karen, great to have you on theCUBE. One final question because you brought it up and I'm always trying to figure out, and it's always something that's going to be, I think, a moving train, but it's always going to evolve. Return on investment, okay, is a huge concept. It's been around finance industries for years, but with respect to with AI and some of this technology leverage, the operating leverage you get with technology can change services, even service businesses. I know that you're on a tech side of it, but companies who are in service businesses are going to take advantage of Sysdig and other platforms to get operating leverage. So there's always this conversation around return on investment. How should we think about, in your perspective, return on investment when you have all these integrated kind of systematic pieces? It's a systems thinking concept. Because the old days was, okay, what's the return? Payback is sales, that one buys that. Now you have this intertwined ROI equation.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very great question. I mean, I think it's very early days. Hopefully I'm answering your question, but I think there's also been a lot of dialogue around pricing models, right, for AI. You heard me say like every company needs to, will become an AI company. And I think we're seeing variations of that as well, of like, a certain level of AI that's like embedded into the product, that's included in the pricing. There's some models that go above. There's usage versus subscription. There's some companies that are doing outcome-based as well, right? But I think as well, when you're sitting on the other side and you realize that your vendor is using AI, that also might create margin pressure because you're saying, okay, do I need to pay the same price for this when this vendor's taking advantage? So I think everyone's going to kind of sort of realize that there's going to be a reality.
About governance, it's like, what's on the other side of that? What's the software supply chain look like? I mean,
exactly.
A lot of stuff.
You mentioned a couple of times supply chain we didn't really get into, but I think that is huge, especially from a governance perspective, and I think particularly for smaller businesses that rely on it so much.
Well, it's turning out these interviews are so good, we could probably go an hour, but we have to break Karen right there. Again, I think we're going to come back to ROI, software supply chain. These are real risk potential variables that need to be managed. And again, the CFO's at the center. Thanks for coming in and sharing your insight. And of course, we'd love the CFO AI conversation because at the end of the day, money's involved in ROI and payback, TCOs, all the old ways to measure things are going to be turned upside down. Risk management is top of the priority. Of course, all new way, as part of the AI wave, of course, theCUBE and the NYSE's got you covered. I'm John Furrier with theCUBE. Thanks for watching.